I dream for all of us to own wardrobes with garments made from sustainable sources, including fair wages for the makers. I aim to motivate and inspire viewers to see the clothes they wear as an expression of their personality and their beliefs. This is the Slow Wardrobe. Come and have a look. In this episode, I talk about boxy jumpers and how to make them work on very different body shapes. I'm using the Grams Revive cardigans and the 4 different versions I have of that to illustrate boxy jumpers. We look at the large versus the small check of the popular multicolored Layercake linen fabric. I'm giving an exhibitor's perspective on the Edinburgh Yarn Fest. I'm announcing an exciting collaboration with fivemoons yarns. I'm showing some of our fabulous customers sharing their layer cakes, and I'm inviting you to share yours. I go into a little bit of background as to the Layercake story and why we don't offer any patterns for sale. And last but not least, a sneak peek at the Layercake dress. Hello, here we are with a lineup of layer cakes, all wearing the cardigan that I keep batting on about, the Grams Revive by Isabel Kramer. And the reason I keep going on about it is, well, as you can see, it looks great with layer cakes. Now, it's by no means the only cardigan or jumper that goes well with layer cake. I will go through the details as to why a particular shape like this works so well. It was a real discovery for me when I knitted the first one, which is the one that I'm wearing, that a positive ease of 20 inches in relation to my bust creates a nice positive ease at hip level for me as well. I'm one of those people who's a bit of a triangular shape. I'm narrower at the top and wider as we go further down. So if I knit something that has a lot of positive ease, and a lot of positive ease is often described as about like 6 to 8 inches, by the time that garment reaches my hips, half of that positive ease is gone because of the difference in my bust and my hips. There's like 4 or 5 inches difference in measurement between the two. So if most of that positive ease disappears and it's nice and wide at the top but almost fitted at the bottom, then my shape turns into a straight pillar, which doesn't look very good. I end up looking more like a bookcase than a shaped person, which of course I would prefer. So what I discovered with this cardigan, and I can't believe that it's taken me 56 years to realize this, is that if I want a nice boxy look and I want to still have a sense of shape about me, then the amount of positive ease around my bust needs to be a lot bigger. And that's exactly what this cardigan does. It asks for 20 inches of positive ease in relation to your bust size, and then just goes straight down. So having that option, much more positive ease at bust size, and then going straight, would be one option for me to create a nice fluid line around my hips. Of course, the other possibility is an A-line, and that's what some of our layer cake garments achieve very nicely. There are, of course, lots of people who don't have that difference in circumference between their bust and their hips, or for whom it is the other way round. If you are the other way round and your bust size is bigger than your hips, then you can literally go the other way. So knit something that is more fitted around your bust but still goes down straight, creates that same loose look around your hips without giving further emphasis to the top half of your body. So if a cardigan like this, you want it to look good and your bust is big to begin with, then disregard that demand for 20 inches of positive ease in relation to your bust and do the 20 inches of positive ease in relation to your hips instead, or go somewhere in between. So part of the positive ease for you would disappear here at the top, but it will return here at the bottom and gives that nice swingy look that you want from a boxy top. If you are straight in terms of your bust and hip circumference, then you can achieve this look with less positive ease altogether. You can either stick to the 20 inches as demanded by a pattern like this one, or go for a little bit less, because that same loose effect will still be there on you by the time the cardigan and the straight lines reach your hips. So you've got the most ability to play around with those different sizes. For both an A-line as well as an upside down triangle, in both cases, I'm recommending you to go on the basis of your hip measurement rather than your bust measurement. Hip measurement to ensure that you've got enough positive ease left if your bust is small, but also hip measurement if your bust is bigger. And the width of the cardigan or jumper will absorb what's happening up here in order to achieve a nice line down here. So I hope that makes sense. Give me a shout if it doesn't. Meanwhile, I will talk you through what these ladies are wearing. Here on your left, my right, is one of our brand new baggies in the small check. As you can see, I'm wearing the large check and I'm right next to a small check. The only difference between the two is the size of the checks themselves. The little panels in the large check are 4 times as big as the panels in the small check, but the colors are all identical. So that means that the repeats are condensed. There are more repeats of colors in the small check than in the large. And the reason I went for that is, of course, lots of you adored this fabric but didn't want to invest or didn't want to wear a play suit, which is the only garment that I used for this particular fabric. And I did that because of proportions. We have a big issue around proportions with the use of our fabrics, as well as the use of color within Layercake. And I'll say a little bit more about that as well with regards to the lines that break up the panel of the Gramps Revive, because I think those actually play a part as well in how effective they look once worn on different shapes and sizes. But to come back to the check, so the large check for large garments and the smaller check for literally smaller garments. Not smaller in size, but smaller in the amount of surface that you get to see, so that you don't run the risk that on a smaller size, part of the repeat of the pattern can never be seen because it gets chopped off. In this case, you always have at least one repeat of the colors on a garment, whether they are baggies or, as we get them to come through, smocks and tabards. Andrea is sewing like a mad woman to achieve a bump of them as soon as possible. We're catching up with Edinburgh Yarn Fest orders at the moment, and then she will resume producing the small check smocks and tabards. We'll be sure to have some of them with us at Wonderwool, but I will also announce them on the newsletter for people who would like to pre-order them. You'll definitely have that opportunity. You're not going to miss out on them if you don't happen to come to Wonderwool. That would be unfair. So a Gramps Revive in one of my own yarns, which is the Yak and Silk blend, which I have on the website in a number of different colors. In order to knit most of the sizes, definitely up to the second biggest size, you need 300 grams, as in 6 hanks, 650-gram hanks of the main color, 1 of the narrow stripes, the second color, and 2 hanks, so 100 grams of the bottom one. So in total that's 9 hanks. 6 of the main color, 1 of the narrow stripe, and 2 of the wide stripe. And that's what this cardigan is knitted in by one of my fantastic sample knitters called Megan. Megan, just in case you're watching this, I've had so much positive feedback on the incredibly smooth knitting that you did on this cardigan. I know the yarn knits like butter. My goodness, you are one talented knitter. It's fantastic. And I just wanted to pass on those compliments from the people who've seen your cardigan hanging at both Unravel and Edinburgh Yarn Fest, who would go up to it and say, is this knitted by machine or was this knitted by hand? It is so beautifully knitted. So thank you so much. Much, much admired. And I can't wait to send you the yarns for the next project. Remember you asking, what is it? It's going to be in soliloquy. I hope you like it. All right. So that is the first outfit. Second outfit, here to my left. Wearing baggies again in the black pinstripe. And then teamed with a smock in the gingham, the black gingham. And then worn with a Grams Revive that I knitted but turned into a jumper instead. So rather than splitting the panels and knitting them individually, because it's all knitted top down, into a cardigan, I just made a symmetrical V shape in the middle here and kept knitting and turned it into a jumper. Same as the others, a bit longer in the back, a bit shorter in the front, and it works really well. This is the Cashmere Gilly by Yarn Tellier at the top, which I bought at Tribe Yarns in Richmond. If you haven't seen Millie's website yet, or if you have an opportunity to go to the shop, please go. The only downside of the shop is that once you enter it, you don't want to leave. She makes you feel so welcome, and there's such a wonderful vibe there. I can't recommend it highly enough. It's a wonderful shop, less than an hour away from me, so I don't need much excuse to jump in the car and zoom there. It's lovely. And on one occasion, I bought the Yarn Tellier yarn after seeing this particular red and white marled version, I think like 2 years ago or so, Alexandra Palace, knitting and stitching show at Alexandra Palace, and I've been lusting after it ever since, and I kept umming and ahhing, and then thought, actually, I would like to turn this into a jumper, and this is the yarn I'm going to do it with. So for some reason I still am not sure about, I skimped on the yarn and only bought 5 balls, so I only had 250 grams. And lo and behold, of course, I started to run out. So what I did with this one, because I was short of yarn, is I repeated the narrow stripe and the wide stripe at the bottom of the sleeve so that I could still make long sleeves. So in that respect, it's a bit of a cheat. It's both a modification. It's both a jumper, and I've put those extra bits at the sleeves, which actually works really well. So a tip, especially if you're working with an expensive yarn, if you run out of yarn, then you can either stop with 3/4 length sleeves or repeat those contrasts at the bottom. And in this case, the contrast yarns were a hank of pure silk, and it's like a silk sport waist, so slightly heavier, that I bought a couple of years at Wonderwall, and it was unmarked. It was in one of those bins and was sold off being sold off cheap, had a beautiful luster, and I just fell in love with the color. And it happens to be very close to the red in this particular yarn. So that's what I used for the 6 rows of the contrast color. And then I went for the black of the yak and silk, because it's got that same lovely feel as the cashmere does. It has the same running length, so they compared very well. And it's got a lovely drape, which is lovely to have at the bottom of the garment. So that's the second outfit. And as you can see, the pinstripe and the gingham work together very well. They play very nicely. Then the last outfit, all the way over there, is that was the second one that I knitted myself. After this one, I knitted that one. And that was knitted with a slightly heavier 4-ply called Bugger by Cephalopod Yarns, which I bought years ago in the US. And Cephalopod Yarns, unfortunately, She has, the lady who ran that had to stop dyeing. I think she had physical problems with the heavy work. It's physically very demanding being a hand dyer, and she had to unfortunately give that up. And I bought this yarn from her stall a number of years ago, and had always wanted to knit something special with it. So when the Gramps Revive came along and I fell in love with it as much as I did, talk about rabbit holes, I knitted that one as the second one. The contrasts are some leftover multicolored yarn that I still had from Sparkle Duck Heather, who very, very sadly passed away a couple of years ago, and who I still miss very much. We used to have such fun conversations about dyeing and the processes that she used to develop her new colors. She's such a talented dyer. So I use every last scrap of her dyed yarns that I have, and this was a little bit of a leftover from another project, so I've used that here. I think the color was called Stained Glass. And then at the bottom is, of course, I've forgotten the name. It's one of the yarns by the Fiber Company, and it is a 4-ply yarn that contains linen and silk, and I think merino, but I'll put at the bottom what the proper name of it is. Apologize for that. Maybe it's meadow. Is it meadow? Anyway. So that's at the bottom. Again, I had just one hank of that and had kept it and not really sure what I wanted to do with it. And I thought it was a very nice, softer contrast with this light top. So that's what I used it for. And to come back to the point... Oh, and of course the one that I'm wearing. I completely forgot the one that I'm wearing. Right, the one I'm wearing is one of the Five Moons yarns. And this was a one-of-a-kind colorway that I bought at Wonderwall last year. And Sharon, who is the dyer behind Five Moons, had been dyeing colors that I had asked her to do specifically to go with the large check linen. So I don't know whether she had colors left over or whether that kind of palette was on her mind, but she dyed some one-of-a-kind in her Diana 4-ply, which came out like this. I saw it on her stand and went like, oh, grabbed what she had, which was 400 grams, and then proceeded to knit the Gramps Revive when it came out in September, purely with the idea of wearing it with the multicolored square. So that's the top of this. And speaking of Sharon and Five Moons, some of you may have already noticed this, but Sharon has decided to list her yarns on the Slow Wardrobe website. You'll start seeing more collaboration between us. We went to Edinburgh Yarn Fest together. She featured her yarns on the Slow Wardrobe stand at Edinburgh Yarn Fest to introduce the whole concept. There's still going to be a Five Moons website. It's not like she's disappearing as an independent dyer, but we recognize that there's so much synergy between what she's doing and the colors that she develops, the way she develops them, as well as what I'm doing within the Slow Wardrobe, that we said, well, let's bring the two together and start building on that synergy. So that's what we're doing. You'll see lots of exciting projects coming through, hopefully this coming year. Both of us can't wait. We're chomping at the bit. And the Edinburgh Yarn Fest was the first opportunity for us to do a show together. And of course, the ideas and the sparks were flying throughout the show, despite the fact that we were very, very busy. More about that in a minute. Just to finish off the rest of my outfit, the narrow stripe is the mole color, the undyed color of the yak silk, same as here. Use the same color there. And then at the bottom, I'm trying to desperately remember what I used there. I remember. That was also the yak and silk, which I had dyed myself. And it's got this beautiful kind of bluish, almost purplish color. So that was a one-off really. The water that I used was quite hot when I was dyeing that, and that very often leads to more blotchy dye results, which I very clearly have here. And in this case, I absolutely loved it. So I use that because, again, it's a nice soft transition to that extra broken line on the garment. So before I dive into Edinburgh Yarn Fest, coming back to what I was saying, if I step back a little bit and go back into my lineup, you'll see those lines across all the bodies. And it really emphasizes, they really emphasize the fact that you're looking at a layered outfit. They're little blocks of color, and from a distance, it's almost difficult to see whether the lighter color of the smock then is worn with a very dark top over the top of that and an even shorter cardigan. It could almost be another layer. So that broken up silhouette of those different layers on top of each other is really enhanced by wearing something like this with an extra band across it. It looks like another layer. The other thing that it does is it enhances the way the cardigan hangs. You can see the edges of the cardigan hang lower than the middle does. And you see that even more so when I show you from the side and from the back. It's drapey. And even with a yarn that's a little bit less drapey like this one, there is so much positive ease that you get that curved line. And those curved lines, of course, we work with a lot within Layercake. There's curved lines at the bottom here of my play suit, and there's curved lines with the smocks that are worn here. But it also works as a contrast if you combine it, for example, with a tabard or even a mini tabard, where you'll just see a little triangle sticking out. So it's working with those different curves and different lines, and again enhancing the fact that there are more layers worn together. That's something to look at when you get dressed and you're styling your own outfits as well. It doesn't all have to be Layercake, but when you get dressed, try and pay attention, try to start paying attention, not just to how the colors go together and the textures of the fabric, but also where is the positive ease on a garment. Coming back to what I was saying with the positive ease here and how that positive ease works with your particular body. Where do you need the positive ease to create a silhouette that you like yourself? So look at the positive ease, look at the curves of how garments fall, and keep that in mind. Start trying to keep that in mind when, for example, you choose the yarns that you're going to knit something with. Whether you're buying the yarns new or whether it's something in your stash and you think, ooh, I've got this particular garment, I've got this particular jumper or cardigan in mind, maybe I should knit it out of this. Then don't just think, well, what could I wear it with in terms of color, but also how would that yarn behave with that particular garment? There are some garments that really need a more structured yarn, and other garments that really benefit from the drop and the droopiness. This particular cardigan could go both ways. If you would knit this from a stiffer yarn, it would still work, it would still hang nicely, but you'd have to keep in mind that you would create a bit more bulk here because it wouldn't move as fluidly. And that, of course, has an impact on your silhouette and how it looks on you. And that is impacted with the frame, your body, that's underneath. So to make a very obvious example, if you would knit this cardigan out of a yarn that is quite bulky and that has more structure and that stands up more, the muka yarns that I have, for example, the woolen spun muka yarns that I sell, they're less drapey, they stand up more, they have more presence, more bulk. even though in terms of weight they may be exactly the same as a drapey yarn. So if I would knit this out of a muka yarn, it would drape very differently here. There would be more volume around my shoulders. It would still hang down, I would still have slightly lower points, but there would be more volume here. If you combine that with a frame that has much bigger boobs, for example, or a broader back, then the silhouette gets more pumped up, if you like. Everything here will end up looking fuller and broader. And if that's a look that you're after, then it'll work great, of course. If not, then you would be better off reducing the amount of positive ease so everything looks and feels more fitted around the top. And then you can do whatever you want in terms of where you want things to go with regards to drape and shape at the bottom. So you can either go for an A-line if you want it wider at the bottom, or keep it straight. But it's just to illustrate that with a different yarn and a different drape, you'll end up creating a very different silhouette. And in some cases that may work better on your particular body shape than others. So start looking at yourself when you get dressed that way, keeping that in mind. Look at what different silhouettes do and different types of garments do in terms of your silhouette and whether you like it. Creating that awareness, especially if you make your own clothes, both knitted as well as potentially sewn, is really helpful. There's a lot of information around about what different garment shapes you should wear based on your different body shape, but just judging the garments that you have and that you try on and taking into consideration how the fabrics behave and how the shapes in those fabrics behave on your body can give you a lot of feedback that you can use when you go out clothes shopping or you choose yarns and patterns to knit. So, just talking back a little bit more about Edinburgh Yarn Fest. Boy, what a trip that was. A trip in more ways than one. It started with Sharon travelling from Devon with her little van full of yarns that she was going to bring with her to feature on the Slow Wardrobe stand. So she came around on Monday afternoon so that we had plenty of time to transfer her stuff into the trailer. We finished packing on Tuesday morning and then set off. The target was setting off here at 10. We didn't quite achieve that. We set off at 10:30. It was the three of us, Sharon and Andrea, of course, and myself. In the last couple of years, we've been traveling up by van to Edinburgh Yarn Fest. It's just faster and you sit nice and high. It's more relaxed somehow. With the trailer, you constantly have to keep in mind that the thing isn't swaggering behind you, etc. Well, we had done a decent job loading it, and we didn't bring quite as much furniture as we've done in the past. We left a counter at home and things like that. As a result, it wasn't quite as heavy, but still, it slows you down traveling at 60 miles an hour, obviously. So it took us about 9 hours, I think, to travel up to Edinburgh. Then we were able to take it relatively easy on Wednesday morning, did some grocery shopping, and then went to the Corn Exchange to check in a lineup in order to unload. That in itself was a bit of an adventure. Part of the car park behind the Corn Exchange is taken up by a large marquee, which is a fantastic extension of the venue. This year, the placement of the marquee and its fixtures was such that the space for the cars to drive around the marquee to get to the loading bays was relatively narrow. And luck would have it that the trailer that I rent is slightly wider than a regular car. Oh my gosh, that was stressful. I think I had less than half an inch on each side to steer the trailer through. And that in itself wasn't the most difficult bit, but you end up coming around a bend. So the trailer needs to be straight. And if it's that tight, it needs to be very, very straight before you fit through. So that was a very interesting challenge, but I did it. I didn't damage the trailer or the car, and we could unload. And the unloading process, the whole logistics from a exhibitor point of view at Edinburgh Yarn Fest is always so well organized. The people around the venue are lovely. All the helpers there are fantastic. The traffic marshals, they are worth their weight in gold. They are cool, calm and collected, and they keep things moving. I'm always in awe of the guys. They're lovely and very helpful and very professional. So thumbs up for those guys, and thumbs up for everybody at the Edinburgh Yarn Fest venue, and a big thank you yet again for Mika and Joe for putting on the most fantastic show. This show is going from strength to strength, and of course I can't judge from what it's like as a visitor, but from an exhibitor's point of view, boy, it's my highlight of the year, I kid you not. All right. So we unloaded and we started setting up the stand on Wednesday afternoon, and then had 3 fabulous show days. We saw so many people that we knew. We also saw lots of people that were new to us, who came to see what Layercake was all about, who had heard that Fivemoons was on the stand and came to fill their bags with Fivemoons yarns. So it was fantastic. I think it was a record in terms of selling Layercake garments at a show, and thank you so much for the people who came back. I'll show you those now. Actually, there were a whole bunch of people that came to buy Layercake and then come back the next day wearing it and getting feedback as to whether we liked the outfit that they were wearing and how they had styled it. And in some cases were just so proud of their outfits and said, "Hey, look, I've got one. What do you think? How am I wearing it? Should I do this or should I do that?" It was lovely. It is so nice to get the feedback and people saying, "Oh my gosh, is it so comfortable? I want to wear it all the time." And great. But of course, the other advantage is that the number of Layercake wearers at the show is going up, and people see that. It's like, hang on a minute, there's another one. Hang there, there's another one. What are you wearing and what are you wearing? And people say to each other, "Oh my God, I just bought this and it feels so good. And look, pockets!" So, we got a lot of feedback from that as well. And then other people coming to see, well, what are these clothes about? And why are you selling clothes at a wool show? To which I then, of course, tell the story that, for those of you who don't know, I didn't start selling clothes. My background is in fashion. My education is in fashion. But I decided that I hated fashion in the fashion world, rather, with a vengeance. I did not like what I saw at all during and straight after my education, and I thought, I'm going to run a mile. I don't want to be part of this. I don't like it. It is not friendly. It is bitchy and lots of backbiting and backstabbing, and I didn't like that at all. Little did I know that there are big parts of industry in general that are like that. I just ascribed it to the fashion industry. Still, throughout the years, I've always been happy that I wasn't part of it and that I chose a different direction. So when I started Tall Yarns initially and started selling yarns and started to design garments to go with those yarns, I guess it kind of reawakened the fashionista with a very small f in me. Fashionista with a small f in the sense that I'm not really into fashion and trends and things like that. I've always kind of sailed my own course when it comes to clothes. Always used to make my own clothes, and started doing that again when I started to design the knitting patterns to go with the yarns that I was selling within Tall Yarns. So I made some smocks, some apron-like garments that I would throw on over whatever I was wearing, with big pockets so I could chuck my knitting in when I was serving someone and pull it back out when I was demonstrating. So that worked really well, and people kept saying, "Oh, where did you buy that dress?" And I said, "Well, you can't really buy that dress. I just made a couple for myself." And eventually thought, I'm missing a trick here. I'm giving the wrong answer. So I made 5 or 6 of them and brought them to the knitting stitching show in Harrogate one year. And they sold straight away, no questions asked. People just nabbed them, and I thought, I need more. And after a search that lasted a while, my good friend Helen, who got me into doing shows and got me to start up Tall Yarns in the first case, she found a lady, Andrea, who was in the same village, literally the next road from where I live, and who was working in the bespoke wedding dress business, which is very, very stressful, working with very stressed clients, of course, on very difficult fabrics, and who was thrilled to have something straightforward and simple, relatively, to work on next to the stressful dressing, wedding dresses, and that was the Layercake garments. So she started helping me produce them. And for the next 2 years or so, it was just handing over dresses at the front door with an invoice. I would hand her another bolt of fabric, and she would go away and make dresses out of that. She also helped me develop the different sizes of the Layercake dresses, because Andrea is not a seamstress. Andrea is a cutter. She has this incredible ability to see a 2D shape, a drawing or a sketch, or sometimes even just an idea that you give her by describing it, and translating that into a pattern that can then be sewn into a 3D shape, into a garment. That is what a cutter does. The thing is with Andrea, she also has this incredible high standard and very, very specific aesthetic around the quality with which garments are made. Partially, I'm sure it comes from having honed those amazing skills on very difficult fabrics for years, but it's also just an aesthetic that comes from within. She sets herself extremely high standards. So all the garments that she's ever made for Layercake all come out beautiful. They have this amazing finish. They are sewn to perfection, and the people who buy them very often know a little bit more than the average person about sewn clothes, because they sew themselves, or they had a family member who sewed, or they just have more insight in garments because they knit, for example. So it is very highly appreciated that these garments are well made. And one of the side effects, of course, is that it helps them last and last. Because what I was doing right from the beginning when I was sourcing the fabrics is source very high quality linens to make these garments out of. So high quality fabrics that have been pre-shrunk and then made to a very high quality standard is what we started to build on. And Andrea, being a cutter, for her it was very easy to help develop the different sizes of the collection. And the fact that she is still so involved with the brand now also allows me to offer this bespoke service that has given me the opportunity to use the tagline "Everybody Happy" with Layercake, because that's purely because she is able and willing to take the measurements of a person and then adapt the measurements of a standard Layercake garment to the specific measurements of a customer. Of course, we charge some extra for that because it takes a lot of extra time of that's Andrea's. So she gets paid for that, of course, by the customer directly. But it's an extra service that turns Layercake into something very different from your average garment brand. So as the brand grew, we added more different shaped garments to the range, and that's where we are at now. Since I was always exhibiting at the wool shows, that's what I kept doing, and the Layercake range has kept growing. And what I've done is to make sure that the yarns complement that. So the whole idea, knowing that that wasn't done anywhere else either, the whole idea is that you end up being able to buy a garment and then knit a garment, knit your own design, or knit a pattern by somebody else that goes with it. And in terms of color combination, I make sure that, of course, all of that works, including the linen yarns that we now sell that are made by the same factory that produces the fabric for us. So it all kind of hangs together quite well. Now, one last point with regards to that, because of course people say, well, since you are making the dresses but you're selling the yarn, why not sell the fabric and patterns to go with it? Because I knit but I also sew, so why don't you let me sew my own playsuit? And the answer to that question, I'll put it out here because I answer it so many times at every show that we do. And it's a very logical question. I don't mind getting the question at all. But that is that the fabrics that we choose for the different garments that we make are very carefully chosen. Going back to what I was saying before about proportions and how things drape and how things sit on a body, giving you one example, this particular linen, the linen check, is woven with the same yarns as the other linen garments, but it's woven with different types of weave. And that gives it a different drape. It moves differently. It falls and hangs heavier, even though it's the same weight. Same as what you have with different yarns. You can have yarns that are all the same running length and are all 4-plies, but boy, do they behave differently when you knit them. That's the same with different weaving styles. It's the same linen, it's the same weaving machines, but there are panels that are herringbone, there are panels that are twill, and it's all to create the particular colors. But the result is that you end up with a fabric that hangs differently. Now, if you would use this exact fabric and use it on some of the other garments, those garments would hang differently than the other linen ones do. And in this particular case, it's a small difference. It's not a big deal. But if you would take the pattern for a smock or a tabard and use a cotton gabardine or a herringbone wool or a cotton twill, for example, you would end up with a garment that would sit very differently. And some people can judge that difference very well. Others, unfortunately, can not. So, yes, I can put a kit together with the pattern and my fabric and hope that the person who buys that kit manages to make a good looking garment out of it. Sewing skills is a whole different ball game in that respect. But from that moment on, that pattern will go and live a life of its own. And I just cannot live with the idea of those patterns being used in completely the wrong fabrics and then come up with a garment that doesn't look particularly well on them, that doesn't fall well, and then turn around and say, well, no wonder it's a shit pattern. It's not a very good pattern. I'm not going to use that pattern anymore because it's a bad pattern. It's got nothing to do with the pattern. It's got everything to do with the other elements that make up the finished garment. But that's the background of it. I would like to keep hold of being in charge of the combinations of which fabrics in which weaves, in which shapes, and in which proportions, because that's what turns those Layercake garments into something that works so well. That's what makes you put it on and turn around and say, wow, that looks better than I was anticipating. And I want to keep hold of that. That's why we're not going the route of selling patterns and fabrics either as kits or separately. Coming back to Edinburgh Yarn Fest. Okay, so we had 3 days of lots of fun, and I've shown you the pictures of the people who came back. I'll show them again right at the end of the podcast. And I would like to extend an invitation to everybody now. If you have photographs of yourself in Layercake garments, send them to me, email them to me. I promise that any photographs I get from you wearing your Layercakes, I will display on future podcast episodes. I love to see them, but also because I cannot show enough different bodies and different dress styles. I show you in these episodes different ways of wearing Layercake, but that is only enhanced when I get people's personal interpretations that I can add to that. So if you can, please send me your photographs wearing Layercake, and feel free to explain with the photograph what you're wearing it with and why, and if there was a special occasion or whatever. Any extra information you can give me would be great, and I promise to feature them in the podcast. That would be fabulous. Thank you in advance. Right, I promised you a teaser. Here it is. This is the charcoal cross weave. Shall I put this lady aside so I can flounce a bit more? There you go, love. There. Okay, so dress. Slightly higher underarm, so it's easier to wear with less underneath. Same big pockets as always. Nice balloon shape, but still plenty of space to walk. And on the outside, close to ankle length. Oh my God, you're going to say she's 5'10" and I'm only 5'3", 5'4". Not a problem. We're going to do it in 2 lengths. This is the long length and there's a shorter length. Andrea is 5'2", so we have modeled the length of the short one on a 5'2" frame, and it hits her in the same place as this one hits me. So even for shorter ladies, we're going to have that same lovely silhouette that this one has. Showing you again, slightly higher armholes, the rest of the shape, keeping it very simple, so it's perfect for layering with other Layercake pieces. The tail smock looks stunning, of course, with it. I've already worn this with a pair of baggies underneath, which looks really good as well. But smocks and tabards, the mini tabard, they all look good over the top of this piece. And since we're moving into summer, of course, we're going to do some lovely summery ones for you. We're working on it all as fast as we can. This is the first time that we're introducing 2 garments in one season, and it all has to be done here in-house, and then we just can't turn it out as fast as we would like to. We hope that's going to change, of course, as we grow, but there you have it. So bear with us. We're working on these dresses as fast as we can on the back of the launch of the overalls, which are doing very, very well as well. So bear with us. We come out with this as fast as we can, but as I promised, here's your little sneak peek. It's on its way. The Layercake dress.